Hey guys, it's Zola, and we're approaching the end of our Photoshop Mastery course. I'm pretty sure I've got through most of the menus and the things that I use. Today I'm going to show you a few more which are used to manipulate your layers around and move them. And maybe I should have covered this sooner, but it's not really a menu. It's kind of hidden away within one of these at the top. So I'm going to explain this today, and you will have a good idea as to how to manipulate and warp and move objects around and just get them to look slightly different, because it's very rare that when you bring something into Photoshop that it's going to look exactly the way you want it. So I'm just going to use this render I did like a couple of days ago as an example for no reason other than I have it and I have the rights to it. So what I've done here, if we have a look in the layers panel, is you'll see I have the base render, and then on this layer I've isolated the ball with a mask, and that should be kind of simple to sorry, I've applied the mask. I did have a mask, I've applied it, so now it's just the ball on a separate layer. And so the way you can manipulate a layer is obviously by having the select tool. You can move it around, and if you press Ctrl T, you get this little bounding box. Now the bounding box will depend on the outer limits of your layer. So at the moment we can see the outer limits of our layer are just restricted to where this ball is. So I can rotate this ball around if I wanted to, if I wasn't completely happy with it. That's probably the simplest operation I can do. Obviously we can do all this kind of fun stuff like blending modes and such, but yeah, that's the simplest operation. Now the power in this gets to when you have a look at the other tools which are slightly hidden away. So if you do Ctrl T or Command T on a Mac and right click, you'll see you have a little menu here of operations you can perform. So we've got the obvious ones, which are flip. So you can always grab outside the area and spin it, but if you want to flip it exactly, it's a really quick way to do it. Left and right. You can rotate it 180, which is almost the same as flipping it. Count 90 degrees clockwise, and so on and so forth. Again, you can do that here, and you'll have a little menu that comes up that shows you the degrees you're doing it. If you hold shift, you can lock this to increments of 5, which is really useful if you just want to get exact 90-degree rotations, such as here. So all pretty simple up until now. Let's bring that menu back up. Ctrl T, right click. Here we have some more interesting ones. So we have warp, perspective, distort, and skew. I'm going to show you skew first. So skew lets you do this kind of operation. Now you can skew it however you want. You can skew it up and down, or on the top and bottom axis, and this is something I use sometimes to give my so obviously now it looks more like a jelly bean or something like that. So if we have a look at it there, so it's a really cool technique, and the way I would use this sometimes would be to maybe make some text, and if I make this white, and again, so what I'm going to do is move it down, and if I press T I can come up and change the size of it here, but the quicker way to do it is do Ctrl T, and you can drag the text to exactly the size you want, whereas if you were doing it with the text controls, you would be kind of limited to these numbers, or you would have to type it in and kind of guess. So when I'm resizing text, I always use Ctrl T. So yeah, so this transform operation not only works on layers but on text as well. So I can right click and go to skew, and I can just make my text more italicized. You can do this inside the text. So if I press T, you can change it from regular. Some have italics already, but if you want to kind of skew it the opposite way, then that's something you can only do here. And so as you can see, what I'm trying to do now is kind of try and match the perspective of these boxes here. So what options do we have? So we have the skew, and the skew will kind of work to an extent, and if we press Ctrl T we can rotate it slightly, and then you see we have like our text kind of almost sitting how we want it above here, and yeah, we can. So that's a pretty cool operation. and then you could maybe come underneath and like paint a little shadow. I'm not going to do it too, I still have my brushes on from yesterday, I do apologise. Let me select a softer brush. I'm doing this off screen, but you guys should know what I'm doing by now. But yeah, you could like kind of like paint in a faint shadow here and make it look like this text is floating above these blocks. It's kind of cool. What else can we do? We can, first of all, I'm just going to make another selection here because I've warped the other one. So I'm just going to drag out circle selection and just hit Ctrl J to duplicate. And because I had a selection made, we're going to make a layer in that selection. So we have our ball back. I've hidden it, but we have our ball back. Ctrl T. So Puppet Warp and Content Aware Scale are not available, so we shall worry about those shortly. Perspective is kind of like skew, so you do skew, but what you have the added advantage of being able to pull things into perspective. So again, I can hit then Ctrl T to kind of rotate it left and right, and this starts to become kind of more interesting because it's slightly more powerful than skew. I'm going to undo, bring it back to a ball, Ctrl T. So that's what perspective does. Distort lets you grab a corner, and this is what I would usually, distort is what I would usually use if I wanted to get something to sit exactly in a scene, because you can, if you hold Alt Shift, you can bring these things down at the same time, but you can also, as you can see, I'm trying to line this little box up with the kind of geometry that we have going on in the scene. So that looks pretty good. And we could say that, and then again, you know, you could move it higher and come underneath and paint a shadow. You get where I'm going with this. Again, I have my Wacom pen, so makes it easy for me to just rough this in really quick. But there we go, you know, we've got something there, and you could then paint something on top, and like a little highlight or something, change it to color dodge, and you know, you might even want to constrain it to just that layer, which we're doing with a clipping mask. Again, if you don't know what that is, go back to the other lessons. So yeah, there we go, we've kind of warped this shape into a kind of like floating bean I guess over there. So those are two of the functions, and the last one, and probably the most powerful one, is, and I'm going to make another selection of this useful sphere here in the middle. Oh, we have a problem there, we had our empty layer selected, I apologise. There we go. Okay, and the last one is warp. So if we right click and go to warp, this allows us to have like a little grid, and this is so powerful in manipulating, because we can go from having, you know, what was a circle to then making this look like some kind of deformed jelly shape. And so I could, you know, duplicate this multiple times, each time warp it. Remember that each time you warp it, you're warping. If you press enter and you commit to the warping, you're then like warping a warped version. So the more you do this, the more damaged it's going to look, the more you go along, so every time you warp it. So what I would recommend doing is just getting your original render and just duplicating that once, and then warping that, and then again getting it again, duplicating it again, and so on and so forth. So there we go, you know, we've got these kind of cool little blobby shapes. We can, like, you know, place this one over here, and you know, maybe put this one over here, maybe down there. And yeah, we're starting to get to the point where we're like populating the scene, and it looks like we've got lots of things in here, but actually they all came from this central sphere, which is pretty cool, I think. So we're gonna do one more operation. Actually, we're not going to use this one, we're going to come into this other document here. To switch between open documents, as you can see I have two documents here, is Control and Tab on your keyboard, which is one of the most useful shortcuts you will learn. You can also do Control tilde if you're, or Command tilde if you're on a Mac, which works in Illustrator as well, just as an FYI. But yeah, what are we doing in this here file? So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this here with our magic wand. Again, I'm just going to assume you've seen all my other videos and you know what I'm doing here. So we're just going to try and grab the trunk here, and that looks pretty good. So I'm gonna hit Control J and duplicate this onto a new layer, and then I'm just gonna drag that layer into here. Now, as you can see, that photo is at a way higher resolution if I zoom out. So I'm do Control T, and now we're going to do the things to make things smaller. So if I hold Shift to constrain it, because you always want your layer to stay at the same proportions. If I don't hold Shift, we're going to get something like this going on, which is not what we want. So I'm going to press Shift to constrain it down, which will keep it exactly the same size as we scale it, which is super useful. Okay, so now we've got it in the kind of same world space as these spheres, in terms of size at least. And I'm going to show you probably one of the more useful, but also a bit tucked away. And this has been in since like the last 2 versions of Photoshop, I think. And we're going to look at Puppet Warp, which is here. So what is Puppet Warp? As you can see, I've pressed it, nothing's happened, which is quite confusing. If we look up here, we have Mode, Density, and Expansion. We're going to show a mesh. Now the mesh will, if we zoom in here, we'll see these like little triangles, and we're not quite sure what this is about. I'm going to unhide it. And what happens is if you click on anywhere inside the filled area of your layer, so for this layer it would be this tree, you're going to create a point. And now if you hover over the point, you can move the point around. Now at the moment that's just going to move your layer around because we only have 1 point. I'm going to come here and create a new point, come here and create a new point, here and create a new point. Now watch what happens when we pull one of these points. That's pretty cool, right? So there we have it. So now we can wrap what was essentially like a straight branch almost around this sphere, and it feels completely natural. The more pins we make, the smoother this will be, and the more control we'll have over it. And if we look at the mesh, this is what's going on. It's just literally using these triangles and kind of moving things around. If you've used After Effects, this has actually been in After Effects for a long time as well. I think since CS6, I believe. But there we go, you know, we've managed to warp our little branch into almost looks like hair, I guess. This, yeah, again, this is one of the more useful functions in Photoshop, and there we go. I can give this little sphere a wooden headband. So on that note, I'm going to leave you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. We're really coming close to the end, and then I think we're going to move on to After Effects, which I hope you're excited about. I have a few more things to show you, but I think we should be done within the week. So if you've enjoyed the Photoshop course, please leave some comments and likes on the profile, and I will see you in the next lesson. Thanks for watching.